Stephen fucking Bailey. How you doing?
I'm well, thank you. How you, Glenn?
I'm doing really well, man. Really well. Like we were
Been a
talking about, yeah.
while.
Yeah, well, because we already decided that we can talk about age. It's been probably 30-ish years, something like that. Um,
And well, shoot, what was it, like 91, 92, somewhere in there that we were at Chantrell's 1990 maybe? I don't know.
I mean, it's
Something like
all a
that.
blur to me. Yeah. I think the last
Yeah,
time
I,
I
I
worked,
barely I moved to San Francisco in 93. It was right before I moved to San Francisco. So that was 93. So
right, right.
it had to be
Well,
right in there.
and you had that incredible Volvo, right?
Yeah, man,
I love that car.
I miss that car. I had two of them actually. I had the sedan and I had a station wagon.
Oh,
Both
I
the
love it.
122 S's. One was a
Right.
1966, one was 1967.
Yeah, I mean, beautiful cars. And here's actually a funny story. About 6 months ago, I guess, I want to say about that. Um, I was walking down that alleyway for whatever reason, and I saw almost exactly the same car, like, driving down the alley. And just for a second, it was like, oh my God, it's 1990 or whatever year that was,
Yeah.
again. Yeah, because those are phenomenal cars. Even though I know you had some issues with that car. Like, I remember a few times you're like, can't come
Only
in,
because
car won't start.
I only because I didn't take good care of it. It wasn't the car's fault. It was all user error for sure. I blew up an engine by not putting oil in the darn thing. I mean, it was
Yeah,
I was irresponsible youth.
I look. It was right around that time I had a '65 Ford Fairlane, which is like totally cherry, and I got it for almost nothing. Right, I think I paid like $500 for it, and the car was even back then was probably worth 5 grand. And I was over at my girlfriend's house at the time, and it snowed, and I was like, oh, I'll just leave the car at her house. Right, not even thinking, no antifreeze at all, in the car. And so, like a week later, after the snow melted, I was like, "Oh, I'll just go back and get my car." And of course, it doesn't start. So I took it to the mechanic, and the mechanic is like, "Are you fucking retarded? Like, I mean, sir, like, what is wrong with you? You left this
Yeah.
car, in sub-zero temperatures for a week." I don't
Kids,
know.
man, we didn't know what we were doing.
Yeah, I just like the car. The car was great. And I think I ended up selling it for like 300. So I only lost $200 over like a year. Like, whatever. That's not bad. So anyway, we kind of jumped in without me even introducing who you
Right.
are. Um, so I'm gonna back up to like where I met you, and then kind of I'm gonna let you take over from there. So
All right.
Steve and I worked at a little restaurant, bakery, whatever you would call it, right in Edmonds, Washington, as he was um, preparing to become, what Stephen Bailey has become, right? um,
Laying the groundwork. Laying the
yeah, I'm
groundwork.
trying, man. I'm trying. So, I was the midnight baker, and you opened the cafe. I remember that.
hmm
And almost every morning, because I was just coming off of, working that horrible, bakery, bullshit thing, and you would come in, and almost every single morning, you would crank "It's the End of the World as We Know It" by REM.
Yep.
And it always felt like that was the end of the world. It was like, because, and it literally was for me, because my day was almost over, and you were
Yeah.
just starting,
I was
right?
revving up.
Yeah. And I remember you saying over and over again, you're like, "Hey, someday I'm going to be a famous actor." Like, I remember that vividly, and you might have only said it
I
once, because
literally said I'm going to be a famous actor. I literally said I'm going to be a famous actor.
well,
That's
something
pretty
along those
pretentious of
lines.
me.
Well, hell, when you're 19, 20, 18, 19, 20, however old we were, right? I mean,
Yeah,
like,
right.
you say shit like that.
Sure, sure.
Um,
Yeah.
and it wasn't until many years later, whatever happened, like, both left that cafe, and I think it was like 2004. Yeah, it was probably about 2004. Um, that I was watching a show with my first wife, who was very into reality TV and whatnot, and we're watching, and I said, "Kelly," because she also worked there, right, at Chantrell at that time, and as we're going through this whole thing, watching the show, there's a oh my fucking god, that's the guy who used to open the. You're totally frozen, dude. So I was talking to my girlfriend at the time, who became my first wife, and she was very into like reality TV, and she looks up and she's like, "That guy looks really familiar." And I was like, "No, no, no. I mean, it can't be, right? I mean, like, there's no way." And she watched the all 6 episodes. Like personally, I don't have the appetite for reality TV, so it was like, okay, half an episode, and was like, okay, I'm done, right? Anyway, so she watched the whole thing, and then she came back with, I think that's the guy we worked with at Chanterelle. I was like, holy it is, right? Which made me, I forget how I found it at the time, but anyway, so I found a couple of the episodes and like went back and watched, and I was like, oh my god, and it was entertaining, man. Like the premise of that show is
It was
really
enjoyable
entertaining.
for what it was. It was a weird show, but it was enjoyable for what it was, I think.
Did people hate you because of that? Like, I mean, because you didn't come across as the nicest fucking guy, right? And that was part of the
Right.
script, of course. You know?
I don't think that people, I didn't get a lot of people hating me. I had a lot of people feel like that they could, like they knew me more than like because of the character I was playing on that show. The fact that they set up that I was an actor and they repeatedly said I was an actor made people not hate me as much,
Oh, that's
for it.
true. They did.
But I had
They
a
did.
lot of people who felt like they could come up to me in a bar and just like, hit me on the shoulder and be like, dude, what's happening? Like they knew me. And like, because I was this raunchous guy on the show, that I would naturally be raunchous and, just crazy in real life. And that I would want to do all kinds of crazy things with them. And I was always
Right.
like, oh, I'm just, having a beer. How you doing?
Right. Right.
So there's a lot of that. I don't think people were very frustrated with it.
Yeah.
Just a weird, experience overall.
Well, it was kind of like the beginning of that extreme reality TV too, right? And so like there were boundaries that were pushed, like
Yeah.
societal boundaries that I don't think most people were quite ready for, right? I mean, like they loved it, and I think they loved it
Yeah.
because it was outside of the boundaries. But um, so backing up, so I saw like the first half of the first episode, and then
Mm.
my girlfriend at the time made me watch the ending, and so I'm watching that, and it was like, wow, this is weird. Like it was from a creative standpoint. I was like,
Froze a
this
little
is.
bit.
I was like,
I
this
heard you
is.
say it made me watch the ending.
Yeah. No, anyway, yeah. So I did watch the ending, and that's the important part. Um, and it was really
Damn it.
fascinating because just keep going because I can hear you. Okay, it's all good. Um, and so watching the ending, I was like, well, this is kind of sad, but at the same time, it was like from a creative standpoint, I was like, this is fucking brilliant, right? Like whoever came up with this is brilliant.
It was a very, it's one way to put it, yeah.
Yeah,
Brilliant, sure.
I mean,
But I mean, yeah,
well,
it was a very shift in what was happening in that kind of television at the time,
yeah,
for sure. It was
yeah,
like us and a couple other shows. One I can recall, Average Joe, I think, which kind of had an element of hidden camera, kind of surprisey prize sort of deal, like we had. But it really was a shift in what was happening. And I'm like you, honestly. I don't watch reality TV. It's not my genre, that I
right,
enjoy watching. But that thing was interesting to me as an actor to work on it, just because it was just such a strange improv, task
yeah,
and stuff like that. And it was just like a weird, it was such a surreal experience and such a weird animal. And it's hard to even
right,
explain today because, like you say, I mean, nowadays reality TV is just so whatever, all kinds of places. And back then it was like this unique thing that people were having trouble defining, and it's like, it's weird to be
right.
like, that was something I was a part of. It's odd. It's odd.
No, I can imagine. I can imagine. Um, I yeah, the way that industry has changed is, um, I think kind of the opposite, right? So when people used to talk about reality TV, there was always that, oh, reality, right? Like, I mean, people understood it was like, well, it's not really reality, right? And
Mm-hmm.
now you have shows like I hate to even say the name out loud, but like the Kardashians, which is reality, but it's totally not. But everyone thinks it's real, right?
Well, none of the reality is really all that. The thing that the guy said to me on that show, and we were casually talking, at 2 in the morning after a full day of shooting, we were talking about kind of what you and I were talking about right now. And he said the thing you have to remember about reality TV is it's still TV.
Right.
It's still TV. Like
Yep.
the way that they approach it, the way that they look at the different reality people on the show, they still look at it as characters that they're developing through a
Hmm.
5 act or a 3 act thing. And they, it's still, it's real. Like people say, did that really happen? It's like, well, sure, it really
Yeah, of
happened.
course.
And yeah, she didn't know what we were doing. She was fooled, blah, blah, blah. But there's just so much manipulation that
Hmm.
happens. And I don't mean just manipulation of the edit. I mean manipulation of the people involved and just the
Right.
psychological manipulation to get them to do what they want them to do and stuff.
Hmm.
It's a very weird thing because I'm used to working with actors who we're all in on it.
Right.
Like, we're talking about how to get to places, and now these people are like trying to like corral these real people into like
Right.
having a certain moment or something. It's
I mean, it's like the ultimate improv, right?
Well, yeah, from my perspective, it was
Right.
probably the most improv thing I hope to ever do because it was.
Right.
I mean, literally, there was a couple of days that were like 12 hours all day long, and they kept
Hmm.
forgetting that well, not forgetting, but they kept putting us in situations where like we would drive somewhere because we're going to go in and have this big thing at a clothing store or something, or we're going to go to the beauty salon and get me a redo of my hair or whatever. And that's the gag that we're doing. But they would just leave us in the car waiting for things to free up to get set up correctly. And I'd
Hmm.
be improvising with this woman for like 3 hours, lying my ass off the whole time, trying not to get caught. And I would finally just be like, I had to pull producers beside me, like, you cannot do that. You can't just
Right.
leave me in a car for 3 hours. Everything I'm saying, I'm making up, like I'm going to go crazy.
Well, okay. So we skipped a lot there, right? So
Oh, sorry. I'm
I
just
no no no
rambling.
no I did it. Um, how did you get to that point? So from us working together in Chantrell, and you
Hmm.
going to school at ACT. Um, how the fuck did you go from that to being on that reality TV show? Like, what happened?
That's a good question. Uh, there's a saying in my industry that your career kind of picks you in a weird way. All you
Hmm.
can really do is get the training and do your best to do stuff. But the fact is, you generally speaking, you kind of take the jobs that come along,
Hmm.
unless it's something that you feel uncomfortable with, or they're not willing to pay you, or whatever dumb reason. But generally
Right.
speaking, you take, so that people think because it's a reality show, it was some kind of different experience but it
Hmm.
was still the same audition process. I still went through the same sort of audition process that you would for any series, in the sense that I auditioned for the directors, and then I had to go and re-audition for the producers, and then I ultimately had to
Hmm.
re-audition for the head of Fox Studios, and like do all of that stuff, which is just the same as auditioning for an hour-long drama as a series regular or something. But it was
Hmm.
all like this improv based thing. They actually brought in improv actress to come in and kind of stand in, for the,
Hmm.
the Randy character. And we would just kind of improv in front of these people, and they'd be like, all right, and then
I love it.
you got the job, and you look back and you kind of, well, was that the right job for me to take? I don't know. It was the job presented to me,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. No,
So
trust me, man. I've
you
done
look
many
back
of
later
those.
and go, maybe that was a good idea, maybe it wasn't, I don't know, but it was the job presented,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. And you did a fantastic job. Like I at the time, of course, I was very anti that whole reality TV thing, and
sure.
I've actually watched some of those clips, and after the fact, and been like, I mean, there's no way I could. I mean, like, no way I could have done that. Like,
Thank
I
you.
would have broken character, 100 times, probably per episode, right? Just because, some of the situations are pretty outlandish, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. No, it was a surreal experience. Yeah.
so I only have one last question about that particular show, and by the way, I realize we didn't even say it. We're talking about my big fat obnoxious fiance.
That's right.
So, um,
Quality title.
Well, that okay. So that's the question. So your that was your first like major TV. Like you had done commercials and you had done obviously a lot of acting like in theater and whatnot, right?
Mhm.
But that was your first like television, network television sort of debut, right? Is that
The
right?
first time that I'd had something, I had guested in on shows like Will and Grace and Becker and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
but small roles. That was still when I was
Right.
cutting my teeth. You're right. Like I would come in and
Okay.
say like, "Here's your papers," and then I would leave. So I
Right.
had done some stuff like that, but it was the first kind of thing that got any real attention. Yeah,
Right. Well, I'm going to assume it was also the first time where you're listed as literally in Wikipedia. It's like starring Stephen
yeah,
Bailey, right?
yeah.
And there's no
Right.
one else's name. It's just like because you're the only actor on the show, and at least in theory. Um. So the question I had was, um, first of all, I think you're none of these things, which is why I'm asking the question. But big, fat, obnoxious, right? Like so, your debut, at least made not major screen, but major television sort of debut, right? And the words behind it are big, fat, obnoxious,
Oh,
right?
it's worse than you think, actually, because
Okay.
it's very common for a variety of reasons I won't bore you with, but it's very common that they often shoot something with a different title than what the title ultimately ends up being. So I
Oh
shot that whole
God.
thing with no knowledge whatsoever that that was the title. It was called Whirlwind when we were working on it.
Oh my God.
And part of that is probably by design. Like I said, they're very manipulative. So
Mm-hmm.
they didn't want me to know that was the name of the show. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Not because I would have responded negatively, but just because they
Mm-hmm.
weren't sure if I would respond negatively. So why tell them? You know what I mean? Like that's
Right.
very common in this industry. It's like I would have been fine with
Oh.
it, really, but it's just like they don't tell you. So I experienced what you're talking about. The show debuted around Christmas or
Mm-hmm.
around Thanksgiving, I guess it would have been. It was
Mm-hmm.
holiday season. The point is, I was actually up in Seattle visiting my family, and I was actually went to that QFC or whatever that grocery store is up on 196th and 76th.
All right, right. QFC. I was
And
actually just there last night, which is funny.
is it still called the QFC?
It is, yeah.
Uh, and I somebody said something to me, about it, and then I was like, "What are you talking about?" Some stranger like recognized me, and then I get home and I see these promos that are running, and it's like big fat obnoxious fiance, and I'm dancing
Oh.
around with my in my underwear, and it's like, huh, that's interesting title. Okay,
Oh.
like, and they probably
Wow.
had that as the title from the beginning. They just didn't tell me.
Yeah, probably. Probably. I mean,
But it happens all the time. Like, shoot, we were watching Coming to America 2 last night on
mm-hmm.
Amazon. At the end, they have a bunch of outtakes, and the
Mm-hmm.
clapperboard even for that it said The Quest. Like the name of the project was called The
Oh,
Quest.
really?
You
I
look in
didn't notice that.
yeah, and you're like, well, what is that? And part of it is like they're trying to hide from, they have the signs that direct people where they're going to park and stuff that are all over Hollywood, and you prefer
Right.
it to say The Quest than Coming to America 2,
Right.
so that people aren't, and so it's just things like that happen all the time. It's just
Yeah.
interesting.
I I'm always amused, and this is just a slight segue, but whenever I stay in Hollywood, I always stay at the Roosevelt, and then
Mm-hmm.
I walk down the street to probably one of my favorite bars on the planet, which is Bordner's on Cherokee in Hollywood. Um, oh, you should know Bordner's, man. There's a lot of history there. Um,
I know where it is. It's around the corner from the 24-hour pantry restaurant thing. What is that called? It's been there forever. Like right down. You're talking about right down near the Staples
Musso and
Center.
Frank's is right around the corner. Is that what
Uh,
you're talking about?
no, I'm talking about downtown. You're talking.
Oh
What's
yeah,
back
no,
there?
this is Hollywood. It's Cherokee.
You're
Oh,
thinking of the
oh,
Roosevelt. I am thinking of.
something entirely different.
There's another hotel downtown. Somebody's watching this. They're going. He's talking about that hotel. There's a hotel like the Roosevelt that's downtown. That's right by the Staples Center. Ah.
Oh, I
Anyway,
think
go
I
ahead.
know what you're
Yeah.
talking
Go
about.
ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Anyway, so when you do that walk, first of all, walking down Hollywood Boulevard, especially during the summer, is like you just don't do that, right? So, um, I've made that walk many times, and I figured out all the like back alley sort of ways to get from like 10 blocks from the Roosevelt down to Bordner's,
Hmm.
and there's a strip where like three or four talk shows are filmed,
Hmm.
right? And they do the same thing. They're like, guest today, and it's like some random person that nobody's ever heard of, right? And I think they do that just to make people like, oh, we're not going to line up like 3,000 deep. We'll only line up 1,000 deep because it's somebody
Yeah, yeah,
we've never heard of before.
yeah. There's stuff like that. It's got now. It's different than what you're talking about, but in the same vein, like they're so paranoid about scripts getting out and stuff now. Sometimes
Right,
I audition for shows with scenes that do not exist. Like you audition with a scene similar to what
right.
they're trying to cast, and then changes. It's
Yeah.
just it's
Uh,
interesting.
2 days ago, I had a guy named Holden Payne on, and literally his real name, Holden Payne. He is the technical director for Sundance. And so we
Mm,
were talking about some of the security stuff they have to deal with, and it's amazing, because they're given 2 copies of the film, and they're timestamped. They're locked into a particular projector, so they can only play
mm.
them certain times and whatever. And still, people are stealing stuff, right? And you're like, but before a film is released, they're like, oh yeah, no, no. Somehow, they're, and I should know since I do software, but anyway,
Hmm.
somehow they're able to do that. Um, and it's a huge problem for them, right? Because the liability is if a major studio, um, and this doesn't necessarily apply to Sundance, but gives you a copy of a film that's not been seen by the public, and suddenly it's out there,
Oh God,
then it
huge,
falls on you.
it's huge. Yeah, I mean, it happens all. I mean, again, not nearly the same as what you're talking about, but just on a myopic, much smaller scale in my world. Like we even get watermarks on scripts that we get that have like our name embedded with them. So if
Really?
I got a script and I even just a few pages to audition with, if that loses I get that, leave that on a subway or something, and then ends up on the internet, it's going to have my name watermarked on it. The studios are going to be like, this guy let
Wow.
out of his hands. And that sort of stuff is happening all day. They got to protect themselves. It's
Well, of course.
bonkers to me. The thing that's bonkers to me is, as a fan of film and television myself, I do not understand for 1 second why anybody wants advanced information. It's crazy to me.
Yeah,
I
no,
don't
I
want to
get
see
that.
part of Game of Thrones, a half edited thing. Why? I'm going to wait. I want to
Yeah,
see it when the movie comes out. Why would I want somebody to leave? I don't want to read the script. I want to see the movie. Like, I don't get it.
yeah.
Why people,
No, I agree. I agree. There's a flip side to that, which is people who um, read a book after the movie is made, which always makes me a little bit angry because it's just because I guess I fall more on the literature side than the film side.
sure.
And the thing that really makes me angry are books that are written after the movie, right? So there was no book.
Right.
There was a script that somebody had, and then they write a book.
Yeah.
I'm like, well,
It's a book based on the movie, based on the play, based on the Broadway
exactly.
musical,
Yeah, exactly.
based on
Exactly.
an idea by a guy named Jim.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I know why they do it because, I mean, money makes the world go round, right? I mean, like, you figure out that right pathway to profitability and stick with it, and studios in my industry, music and certainly in software, um, very, very guilty of that, right? So I'm not calling out the movie industry at all because I think
Hmm.
they have to do what they have to do to survive at this point, right? Because
Yeah, yeah.
it's, and I think going into like, I'm not a movie guy at all, but starting with like, well, Blair Witch Project was probably the one where I think the studios were like, holy shit, you know, some guy with a Super 8 can actually record this movie that,
Well, things are changing in that regard really fast, for sure.
yeah, exactly. So you don't have
People are
to
shooting stuff
spend
on iPhones.
$100 million, right?
Yeah,
You can spend $1 million or even less than $1 million and
fifty thousand
potentially,
dollars. I mean, really.
yeah, and go crazy. Um, so sorry, I didn't mean for this to get into that weird space about talking about the industry because I think we could probably talk for a few hours about
Yeah, sure.
how evil some of those industries are, and it's probably not good for either of our careers. So it's probably best if we don't really dig into that too deep.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
but that reminds me of a couple of things. So, and actually, this is probably before the Fiance show. Now that I'm thinking about it, probably I don't. My timeline, you know how it is. You get older, you forget shit.
It's
um,
a blur, man.
um, I'm thinking that maybe it was Grey's Anatomy that I saw you the first time. Now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know about the timeline. I could be totally off, but I think that was
Oh, Grays
probably
was
it.
after Big Fat. Big Fat
Was
was
it?
in like 2002 and 2003, and then Grays, I want to say 2004 or 2005 was Grey's
Okay.
Anatomy,
Okay.
something
All
like
of
that. Yeah.
all of that decade is a complete blur to me. So I'm glad that you qualified that. Um, I I have a couple of questions about that, man. So I watched the entire series. Like I said, my first wife was, a huge fan of those sorts of shows. And um, so I was kind of forced to watch some of them, but I actually ended up liking, several of those shows. And Grey's
Mhm.
happened to be one of them. And but I'd watched the entire, like a season, I think, or two, because you were like seasons 2 and 3 and a little bit of 4 or something like that. Whatever. It was like 2 seasons and then a little bit of another one, or one or two,
Something like that. I was
whatever.
actually, I think, involved in episodes all the way up to season 7, but the bulk were like 2 to 4. You're right.
Right.
Seasons two to
Okay.
four was the bulk. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's funny. So I watched a bunch of them, and it was only a couple years later that I realized that was you as the bartender, right?
Mhm.
Because age and whatnot, things, we we forget shit. Um, but the funniest part to me is I didn't realize until I started doing just a tiny bit of research, to talk to you this time around, that the name of the bar was Joe's Bar. And because, of course, I knew I should have figured it out because, the character is Joe. So I'm like, well, why wouldn't it be Joe's Bar? Um, and then again, it was only like yesterday, I think, when I finally looked at it and was like, huh, there is Joe's Bar just down the street from Virginia Mason,
Hmm.
right?
Is there?
Yeah, Joe's Bar. But it's a totally divey bar, like totally divey. It's on Fifth between Jackson. I want to say between Jackson and Yesler. I forget exactly, but it's right on Fifth Avenue, and it's one of those bars where people go in
Hmm.
and cash their checks. Right, like on Fridays, it's like they literally let people like cash their checks. Great divey bar. I mean, wonderful.
Nice.
And so I guess, judging by the look on your face, you have no idea how to answer the question I'm about to give you. And that question is, was that in any way based on the real Joe's Bar? Because there are similarities.
No, actually, maybe somebody went there. I don't know. The bar is technically on Grey's Anatomy called the Emerald City Bar, which I think there's actually an Emerald City Bar in Seattle as
Oh,
well. They
yeah,
just
I'm sure there
refer to
is.
it like casually as Joe's Bar. So it's actually the Emerald
Mm.
City Bar. And I don't think it was based on anything in that regard because it was actually the first 1 or 2 episodes. They didn't know if they were going to use that bar set or not. They were
Hmm.
still kind of exploring. A lot of shows have like a third place. They have like the homes, like it's the coffee shop on Friends, and it's the diner on Seinfeld. They got a third spot. You have work and you have home, and that show didn't really have a
Right.
third spot, and so they were
Hmm.
kind of low. So we actually shot the first 2 episodes in a bar in Pasadena
Hmm.
that then when they built the set, that had to kind of mirror the real bar
Hmm.
to an extent for matching and whatnot.
Hmm.
So if people really want to, I don't even know it's the same bar. I think it's probably changed hand 3 times, but if someone really, really wanted to, and they were big enough fans, they could seek out the real Joe's Bar in Pasadena. And I think
Nice.
it's on Fair. I think it's on Fair Oaks. People go, run there
I,
now.
I personally love Pasadena. When I first moved, the first time I moved to LA, I've lived there a couple of times, but the first time I lived in Burbank, and I was like, oh, this is awesome. Like when I first moved there, I was like, this is great. And then I realized, well, the only thing in Burbank are the studios, which were miles away. I lived on Angelino, like right off I-5, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the only other thing was the Burbank Mall. And I was like, this is the worst place I've ever lived in my entire fucking life. Like, this sucks so bad, you know?
Well, there's a huge IKEA up there now. I mean,
Well, I'm
things are
sure.
getting better up in
I'm
Burbank.
sure. But the thing that cracked me up is I think I moved down there in 90, late 90 probably, maybe 91. Um, and I lived in this apartment complex that was um probably shitty in hindsight, but it seemed really cool back then. Huge apartment complex right off I-5, right? Um, and all of the people that I would see down at the pool, it was all like, these tall, thin, like, Adonis, like, both male and females, like whatever. And I'd hear these stories like, I'd see a Pepsi commercial. I'm good for 750 for the rest of my life. Like they were talking about this like mythical thing. And I wasn't there for that. I was there totally more on the music side, which I knew like that was never going to go anywhere. But all these people like, yeah, I just got this commercial, blah blah blah. Oh, it's in syndication. And they're talking this language. I was like, I don't even understand what you're talking about.
There is a language for sure,
Yeah,
and it is extensive and hard to explain to other people, but it's
yeah,
changing all the time too, because everything changes in where
yeah.
commercials and our contracts are and stuff. But yeah, there's those conversations are we're having those kind of quoted conversations amongst actors all the
Oh yeah,
time.
no, no. But I mean, for me, the amazing part was the ease of which these terms are like fly off people's tongues, and of course now being older and having gone through at least on the music side, a lot of this terminology and whatnot, I realized they were so full of shit. Like, I mean, they were so full of shit. Like, if somebody said,
Well,
"Yeah,
that's part of it for sure.
yeah,"
You're dealing with actors. Come on.
they're like, I mean, one guy in particular I remember was like, "Yeah, I made 750K for a Pepsi commercial," and it was like, at that time, it's like that seems reasonable,
No.
right? No, it's not at all. He probably makes, if he was lucky, 7,500, and he might
It
make
was
a
lucky 75K. I mean, there are stories of I have not experienced it, but I do have friends who on the right spot, you could do 750K though. That's flow
yeah,
money. That's the
ridiculous. And we're talking 1991 money, right? Like, I mean,
yeah,
there's no way.
that's flow money right there.
Yeah.
It's not for the rank and
Um,
file.
but yeah, I mean, some of these conversations would be like, yeah, like sitting around the pool on like, an August afternoon or whatever. I'm like, yeah, I got this commercial. Oh, and I get the residuals, right? Like, and I remember one time, actually, it was the same Pepsi guy was like, yeah, I forget what it was. It was something ridiculous, like, oh, I totally forget, but some ridiculous amount every time the commercial aired. And it was like, okay, Pepsi uses the same commercials, like, potentially worldwide and potentially thousands of times a day, right? I mean,
Mhm.
and you're saying you make that much money every time the commercial airs? Like, well, you're going to be the richest man in the world.
Well, you can make some good money on commercials. It's not as extreme as he says, but there is a residual structure, and you, in certain situations, not all of them. I don't want to. It can go really deep into this, but
No,
people always hear that you get paid every time it airs,
right,
and that is true only in a very specific situation, which
right.
what
You're frozen. Please keep talking because this is good. God damn it.
and things like that. It just runs as much as it wants for a certain amount of time for X amount of dollars, and
Right,
they could run it a million times on cable, and you're not getting paid every time. You're getting a set fee for
right.
a 13-week cycle, and then it renews. But
Yeah.
the people, I don't want to get into a big discussion about defending the pay scale in acting, but
No,
the truth
please
of the
don't.
matter is these guys are spending literally tens of millions of dollars a month to put these commercials on TV.
Right.
And the actors who they are trusting with that tens of millions of dollars a month
Mm-hmm.
to present something that's extremely important to them, these
Mm-hmm.
commercials. It is weird that we get paid. Some people have trouble understanding why we get paid more than a firefighter, which is
Right.
reasonable question. It's a reasonable question,
Of course it is.
but it has to do more with, it's not about how much, it's about what you represent to the company, and you're the point of the spear, and stuff
Yeah,
like
of
that. So
course. Of
seven
course.
hundred fifty thousand dollars is completely unreasonable. That's not happening, and that's BS. Even in '91,
Right.
probably.
I'm sure it was. This is some kid who was he couldn't have been older than like 18 and he was from like Ohio. So I'm sure he probably just misunderstood the contract. Like
right.
it was like, "Oh wait, I missed the decimal by like 2 points or maybe even
Well, that's
3 points." Right? Like, I don't know, we're paying you $75 to be a cameo, right?
right. I
It's like,
can't tell you
"Oh,
how many actors, myself included, at some point in their career
mhm.
thought that the thing that they were just doing was going to pay more than it did, and
Right.
very excited about it, and then it didn't. And people
Like,
buy cars and then regret it,
oh,
and people buy homes and then regret it.
oh
I
yeah.
haven't. I didn't do that, fortunately, but
Well, that's good, man. That's good. Plus, you never know because they're always like performance clauses, right, and all of that stuff too, right? So,
well, there's performance clauses in the sense that we have a very strong. When we're talking about commercials and stuff like that, we have a very strong contract. Our union,
hmm
the issue is more, that more commercials are going non-union. But once you're actually in a commercial that is union and it's everybody's abiding by the rules, fortunately, you don't have much. You don't have to worry about it too much.
oh,
Like
that's
that's
good. That's good.
it's been nice. It's nice in that regard. We have a good union. I trust. It's got issues. There's always
Right.
issues, but in general, it's been good.
So, because we were talking about commercials, there are two of yours that I want to just briefly touch on because I find them both completely fucking hysterical. Um,
Okay.
the first one was the Geico one
Mm-hmm.
because that one I remember I was really stoned. I'd smoked a bunch of weed and I was up and it was like 3 o'clock in the
Best
morning.
way to watch my work in general, by the way.
Right? So it was like 3 o'clock in the morning and I had the munchies, so I like had gone upstairs and tried to make some food and I'd just crawled back into bed and I had the TV on, which I never watch TV, but I just happened to have it on. And I was like, who that guy in the tractor, like, holy shit, he looks familiar. And luckily I had like a DVR sort of thing going. So I was like, oh, I rewinded it. And again, I was so stoned, Steve. I kept watching it over and over again. I was like, I think, oh, wait, because I mean, it's only like, 5 seconds out of, a 30-second commercial. So I was like, okay, rewind, whatever. And I was like, that is kind of perfect, man.
uh,
Like,
that
it
was such
cracked me up.
a fun commercial to do, man. I can't even tell you how fun that was. Some are really, really fun. That one was a good
Yeah.
one. We got to
So,
mess with all those different lawnmowers and stuff. And then I don't know if you remember the spot or people watching it, but I'm mowing a lawn and my tractor, my mowing device keeps getting more and more extravagant, wacky.
right.
And there's the best part of it isn't even me. The best part is the other guy. The guy I'm doing the scene with is an older guy who just stuck his head through a hedge to talk to me.
hmm
And
That's right.
that's what made it. That's what made it. Just like him just talking through a hedge while I'm have a lawnmower with flames coming out of it and stuff. I mean, that's
I love it.
just absurdist good times. I mean, that's just those are the kind of commercials I like. I like absurdist nonsense. It's just like
Right.
totally wacky. It was so
Which
much
which leads me into the next one, which is the Geico one, which I just saw for the first time not that long ago. Was is I
fun.
think
Geico.
it's
We're
Geico.
talking about Geico.
No, it's not Geico.
Are we talking about Geico?
The one where you're the attorney.
Oh,
Isn't that
Capital One. Capital One.
Capital One? I'm sorry.
Capital
Yeah.
One.
Why did I say Geico? I'm sorry. Never mind. I was talking about the old one. You know what I mean.
I know you meant.
Anyway, that one cracks me up because it's just like it's such an absurd representation of a lawyer that it makes me laugh every time I see it. Right? I mean, it's hysterical. You know.
My favorite part is that they use this take where it's after Gardner does her bit and it kind of cuts to a reaction for me. And for some reason, I kind of turned to the other people, kind of like, whoa. And I touch my belly. I touch my belly it's just funny. I don't know what I was doing. And so now, when my girlfriend and I watch it, and we'll see, hey, it's come on, and I'll be like, belly touch in 3, 2, boom, belly touch.
I love it, man. I love it. You know what? I got to say this, man. It's a lot of fun, like watching something and randomly see you pop up. You know,
It's fun for me
I,
too.
yeah, I think it's awesome. One of them is you, which I I know it's supposed to be kind of like a teenage girl or 20 or 30 year old female sort of show. I loved it. I thought it was an incredible series, and I'm really excited for it to come back on. But um, I was watching it with my
Yeah.
girlfriend, and I remember I forget which episode it was, but I remember going, I know that guy. And she's like, no, you don't. And I was like, no, I do, I do, I do. I worked with him in Chanterelle, and that's kind of what started this whole process, right? It was like, yeah,
Uh,
no, I saw him. I saw him on there.
season two,
Um,
episode 2, people. Season 2, episode 2. That's what I'm saying.
oh, excellent. No, no, I like that. Um, I I hope for that show. And I don't expect comment on this. I just hope that they got a little bit boring towards the end, or not
Mhm.
boring. They got predictable, right? Which is bad. You don't want to be predictable, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I think the writing is really good. I think that the acting is top notch, but boy, I hope they don't fall down that rabbit hole of
I don't think they will. I mean, I've watched the show season 1 and 2, and I
Mhm.
enjoyed it like you did too. I felt kind of the same way. Like this isn't something I watched it because I was going to be on it. I watched the first season,
Right, of course.
and I didn't think I wasn't sure if I would like it. I really enjoyed it a lot. And then when I worked on it, I felt like everybody, the head writer and showrunner and the lead guy. I'm trying to remember his name. He's a very talented guy. A kid. It's aggravating. You want to beat him up.
Hmm.
You're like, you're too young to be that talented. I'm going to
Oh
beat
yeah,
you up
yeah,
right
yeah. No,
now.
absolutely.
I feel confident that they're going to bring it back third season. I mean, it's
Yeah.
that it'll be solid. The woman I worked with, her name is Silver Tree, and she's one of the main. Anyway, I have a lot of confidence in her. She was great,
Yeah.
really.
No, I think everything is spot on, and maybe it's just the way that we've become as consumers now. Like there's a definite dumbing down, and I think it's partly because well, we as a society have become dumbed down a little bit, right? And so when I do see a show that kind of steps outside of that boundary, I love it. I'm like, great, go for it. Like,
Yeah.
let's not have a happy ending because everyone expects a happy ending, right? Let's do
Mm-hmm.
something that's going to be a little bit different. That definitely steps outside of the norm. Um, Steve, one of my the things that pisses me off more than anything is watching a movie and it always ends with the happy love scene at the end, right? 'Cause it's so trite. Like, I mean, it's coming, and it's like they introduce like, oh, here's a male actor, here's a female actor, or whatever, and you already know, right? Like
Yeah.
within the first 5 minutes of watching the first episode, you're like, okay, well, there's going to be a love thing between these two. Like, okay, great. But I think society really loves the shit out of that, right? I mean, the average consumer is like, yay,
Well, like a lot of times, people want to see things that are familiar to them.
right?
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I get frustrated with it too, but it seems like people just keep wanting it. And
Yeah.
it's the same thing with all the sequels and stuff. People are like, why are they bringing back another, Spider-Man or whatever? And it's like, well, it's a pre-sold franchise, man. People are going to come. We're going to come to check it out. You know, either way.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so I feel like that a lot of that is happening. But on the other side, I mean, You is a good example. The TV show You is a good example. I feel like there's room now more than ever before. The budgets are smaller, and there's a lot of negatives about it from a working on it standpoint. But
Mm-hmm.
there's more of a room, I think,
Mm-hmm.
for shows like You, shows like Barry, shows like The Kaminsky Method, shows like
Mm-hmm.
uh, Ted Lasso. That are smaller and they don't need to live up to 20 million people watching it every Thursday night. There's now room on streamers and different things where you could just have a fun little show. Have you seen the Kaminsky Method? I'm
I
talking
haven't.
about
No, no,
Alan
no, no.
Arkin.
But I would.
Oh, it's so fantastic. And I just don't feel like something like it's about two. guys in their 70s, 60s, relating
Hmm.
to each other as friends, and it's Michael Douglas and Alan Arkin, and it's just fantastic.
Oh
And
wow,
I
that,
always
that
feel
sounds
like,
phenomenal.
oh, you got to watch it. It's either Netflix or HBO. I think it's Netflix.
Okay.
There's 2 seasons of it, and my point isn't, we don't talk about the show, but I just feel like that show pitched, even with those actors 10 years ago, like, let's do this on CBS on Thursday
Hmm.
night. Like, no, man, no, it would have been, if you see it, you know what I'm talking about. It's just a smaller little piece
Yeah.
that there's more avenues for that. You just have to seek it out. You just have to seek it out
Yeah.
more.
No,
You
and
know.
I think that that's incredible, and I think um, that's part of the fallout of having everything available all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's film or music or whatever, um, everything is available at any time. Like if I want to watch anything that is from a major network or a major label or whatnot, I can do it now, right? Legal or not, I
Yeah,
mean, I can
20
do it
different
now.
places.
And I think the trade off of that is that smaller production companies and even smaller studios and labels and whatnot have figured out that they can actually step in and fill some void
Mm.
there, right? So they can
Yeah,
do something for say 500,000 instead of like 5 million, right? And they
yeah.
can do it because well they can. And so I enjoy all of that. I think that's actually great. It's way better than the alternative, which is wait multiple years potentially to go no worries man to go through
Lost it. My computer screens went weird for a second. I couldn't see the Zoom thing. I'm sorry. I was listening.
it's all good, man. It's all good. Hey, I'm nothing but aware of adversity to whatever. Um, I do this thing where I just stare straight ahead and it doesn't matter what happens. I just keep going. Like okay, it doesn't matter. It's all good.
That worked.
I credit I don't know Edmonds Washington drama for that, right? And I'm just like okay, yeah, I'm good. Whatever. You say whatever you want. I'm gonna be fine. But what I was saying is that there's that wonderful thing where these smaller studios and production companies and whatnot are able to um, produce stuff that now has a wide audience because now the barrier to entry is way reduced, right? So there's
Yeah.
not you don't have to spend you know last I saw I don't know what it is in film, but I imagine it's pretty close. But for music, um, the budget is generally for promotion is generally about 2.5 to 3 times the cost of production, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you think about that, and I mean that can be absurd, right? Like if it costs you say $1 million to produce something, to by the time you feed the musicians' egos and pay for studio costs and all that good stuff, right? Let's say it's $1 million, and then you have to spend 2.5 to 3 times that on production. You're talking like close to $5 million to get
Yeah.
something out the door. And you have to recoup that money somehow,
Mm-hmm.
right?
It's
And
big
so,
business. Big business.
yeah, it's a huge business. But
Yeah.
when you lower that barrier to entry, you can end up with some really interesting stuff where people are
Yeah.
like, yeah, you know what, I can do that for half or even a tenth of the
The only
cost.
problem with that, you're absolutely right. And the only problem with that is often the reason those budgets are going down is they're finding ways to pay people less and less, and the contracts are, more loosey goosey, and
So
they're not going to make as much money on it either because it's not going to be a big CBS Thursday night show, which and all the
right,
money that's involved. It's going to be on Netflix, and so I mean, it all kind of works out. It makes sense, but it's nowadays the same job that I would have been offered 10 years ago for a decent amount of money. Now it's
mhm,
just nothing. Like, it's just
right.
like we're just making this Hulu film. We got
Oh, yeah,
we
that's
got a ham sandwich for you if you want a ham sandwich. You can come down and do a ham
right,
sandwich day, but like, and you're kind of like, well, I'm just gonna pass then, I guess.
right.
It's just weird,
And
but
that's tough, man. I mean, that's really tough. And as both somebody who works in the creative side and as a consumer, I struggle with that a lot.
yeah,
It's a hard. I don't know where we're going to end up with that. I mean, honestly, I really don't know.
yeah.
Um, it's this is not the first time in history that we've actually paid people to be, entertainers, right? I mean, this is
Mhm.
historically we've done this over and over and over, throughout the centuries. Um,
Sure.
but I think this is the first time when the audience is sort of like, well, but if it costs me more money to see it, I'm not necessarily as interested, right? And I said necessarily on purpose.
Mm.
Um, and I think that puts people who are both the creators, meaning, yourself, like, the actors, the writers, the, whatever, and the production company is kind of at odds because
Where was that?
it's okay. Keep going, man. Keep going. It all works out in the end. Trust me. Um,
Okay.
I think what we end up with is totally this at odds thing, right? Where consumers, like, they expect things for free or virtually free. Um, the the true artists like yourself are like, yeah, it's totally sucks to have our money reduced, and we're willing to do it to a point, right? Not all the way down, of course, but to a point, just because you are you're creators, you're whatever. But the studios and whatnot are like, no, fuck that. We're gonna take all the money we possibly can, which means
Yeah.
they end up squeezing the creatives like yourself, and they definitely are squeezing the consumers, and nobody really wins in that situation, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just that it's gotten too sophisticated, you know. I kind of, in a weird way, I think that people pinching budgets and everything, it's just like everything else. The technology's gotten better for it, so it goes quicker and more rapid, and the
Hmm.
technology to shoot things faster and cheaper. I mean, we're not really in a place to talk about it, but I mean, my writing partner and I are working on a project right now that's exactly what we're talking about. Like, we started the beginning of the project with the idea in mind that this is the budget and it's going to be low and that's the
Right.
ceiling and that's it,
Hmm.
you know. And the actors that we use go on their journey with us are probably going to be de facto producers, and we're not going to pay a lot of money up front. But if it goes
Right.
big, they'll get a lot of money, and it's just a whole different kind of thing. When back in the day, you know, not that I was ever in a position, I never had a movie I was making or whatever, but if I was that guy, it would be like, well, I'm going to pay this person, you know, $5,000 or whatever, and
Hmm.
that's how much money I need to make a movie, expand it
Right.
out to everybody else, you know.
Yep.
And now it's kind of like, well, you know, we'll figure out a way to just kind of make it, and you know, throw it on YouTube, see what happens, or we'll do it over here and try to get Hulu or try to get Netflix. You know, it's just like it's a whole other thing. You know, it's
Yeah. So I have some ideas around that. Maybe you and I can talk in a a month or two, um,
mhm,
in terms of producing things that can generate money, especially, like, lower
mhm,
volume, or I'm sorry, lower budget sort of films, or music, or
mhm,
whatever. Um, anyway, I'm not ready to talk about it right now, but maybe in a month or two we can talk about it. Um,
sure,
so I think there definitely is that need to like fill that space where you can have low budget, high quality, high profit
yeah.
scenarios.
I mean, the high profit part is always going to be the hit or miss part of it, but I absolutely agree that there is a easier path to production as long as you're willing to keep your budget low and you're willing to, you
Hmm.
know, start from the beginning with what you're writing with that in mind, and you know that.
So
Uh,
that's interesting. Um, I'd never actually even thought of that. So
hmm.
if you're in that situation where your budget's going to be relatively low, writing with that in mind, I mean, that makes total sense, right?
Yeah, I mean, it becomes a necessity because, especially again, I have a writing partner. I'm not allowed to talk about it, but like,
No, that's fine.
uh, even the thing we're working on, you know, it's like we're going to specifically decide that in this series, we're a 9 episode thing, you know, we're only going to have like 4 locations, and they're all going to be
Hmm.
exterior, and it's all going to be natural light with bounce boards, and it's probably going to be
Right.
handheld cameras rather than big, extensive, locked off single camera shots, you know, and like
Hmm.
that. If you just think about that, it'll start to dictate, or at least inform, you know, what it is that the writing's going to be, because
Yeah.
it finds you. and then, I mean, for me personally, I find the confinement more liberating because once you have a structure, then you know what you're doing and you can,
Sure.
but it's an interesting way to approach it. And something that people have been doing for years. I just, it took me a while to figure it
Yeah.
out.
No, hey, if there's nothing, at least, we're learning as we get older, right? I mean, like, that's important.
Yeah,
It's
right.
important.
Yeah, yeah. You'd
Stephen,
hope.
I have a question for you. All right, and
Hmm.
then we can wrap it up if that's what we need to do. But
Okay.
it's a question that I've started asking people for every chat, and that is, what is one thing about you that no one or very few people know that you want to talk about?
Wow. Yeah, we're just gonna have this casual conversation. At the very
Yep.
end, I'm gonna ask you this, like,
Yep, exactly. No, no, no. I mean, well, that's why I kind of do it because it's like, but it's not like in a like what's his name, Jerry, the stupid talk show guy. I can't even think of his name. So bad. It's not like that. Like, not an
finger.
ambush. Yeah, it's not
Oh,
an ambush question. But I mean, it's interesting. Like, what is, like, if somebody was looking up Stephen Bailey, what is something that you could tell them that would they wouldn't normally say?
well, I think the first thing that popped in mind is just kind of we've been talking about it a little bit, but kind of around it. I just feel like I don't know if it's age. About to turn 50. Been doing
Mm-hmm.
this for 30 years now, and 20 years in LA, 30 years total. And at some point in the last little while, I've really let go of a lot of concerns about the industry and about
Mm-hmm.
my career, and just doing my thing. Like, I'm the least aggressively active actor you'll meet in Hollywood. Like, I don't go to
Mm-hmm.
parties, I don't schmooze, I don't shuck and jive. I just kind of do my thing and I just keep
Mm-hmm.
my head down. And so, like, the roundabout answer to your question is just like, I think most people don't realize that I've made a weird shift in that way in the last couple of
Mm-hmm.
years, and it's been very beneficial. And
I love
I
it.
don't mind talking about it. How about
I love it.
that?
No, no. I mean, the one thing, if nothing else, you are probably one of the most genuine humans that I've ever known. And even if we haven't seen each other in 30 years, like, I mean, it was obvious that you were just, you were driven, but not so driven you were willing to sacrifice yourself, right? I mean, you wanted to do certain things, and that was it. Like, nothing was going to stop you. Um, and I
Yeah.
find that really, really, it, well, empowering, right? Um, I I think just one more little story before we can go off. I remember so my second marriage, which went horribly sideways, but um one of my stepdaughters, um on her own, she was like 9 or 10 or something. I mean, she was young, had for whatever reason started watching Grey's Anatomy. And I remember when I first found that out, I was like, um hey, I just mentioned to her, like, offhand. I was like, hey, Lola, yeah, a guy I used to work with, and in Edmonds, years ago, he's the bartender. And I remember her saying, "Oh my God, really?" Like, she was, absolutely fascinated by that, and completely loved it. And I remember I reached out to you and I said, "Hey, is there any chance you can send that, an 8x10 or something, like, signed or whatever?" And you did, which is awesome because a lot of people honestly wouldn't. I mean, they'd be like, they might say they would, but they wouldn't actually do it. And I remember when Lola got it, her eyes like lit up. She's like, "Oh my God, this is awesome." And up until the day I divorced her mom, I remember she still had it, even at like a 16-year-old precocious girl. She still had it, like, in a little frame, by her bed.
Wow.
So,
Really? Oh,
yeah,
that's
no,
great.
really, dude, really. I mean, I don't tell stories just to tell them. Like, I mean, I was really amazed by that, you know, and
Yeah, that's
it just
great. It
kind
makes me feel good.
yeah, I mean, it just kind of spoke to the authenticity. I think that even in a small role or a commercial or whatever, like, you do manage to like show that no matter what. You know what I mean? And
I
that's
appreciate
rare.
that. Yeah.
That's
Thank
really
you.
rare.
And then, before I take too much credit for being cool and sending your, former stepdaughter, I think, yeah, I think that that's largely a product of me having a lot of time in my hands. When you say other people wouldn't do it, you're right, because they've got, like, way more work to do than me. I mean, I'm just around, like, I only get one request every year, so it's easier for
Oh
me.
man, look, you know what? Maybe we can change that over the next 6 months or so. I mean, here's the way I look at
uh,
it. We're like I said, you're almost exactly 6 months older than I am. So my 50th is January 5th. So
no,
we're
July
like
1st. Yeah, almost exactly. Yeah.
yeah, so we're like right there at that moment. Maybe we should set a goal with which is like a within some year of the first 50. That's when we break out, man. Like that's where everything just goes crazy.
Well, like there's the old joke in Hollywood. If I stay here for 20 years, I might become an overnight success, right?
Right, exactly, exactly. Um, and all you have to do is go to any bar or restaurant in Hollywood, and you see all of those people, right, who are still like, "No, I came here in
Yeah.
1985." Like, well, it's 2015 or 16 or whatever. Um, so that's a
It's
good 30-year
amazing.
run.
Oh, yeah, that's actually, if I could just totally you didn't even ask this, completely out of
Yeah,
the blue.
go for it.
Just something that's been on my mind a lot lately. I am extremely, one of the things that I never expected to come out of this industry. Um, Not that I didn't think I'd make friends, but like just, I'm a character actor. I know almost anybody you see on TV that's like a big goofy guy. I probably know that guy from audition rooms. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like,
Love it.
unless they're working out of New York or whatever. But if they're working out of LA, I probably know anybody who's like a fat,
Hmm.
goofy character actor. And the 20 years that I put in here, that has been like the best reward out of all of it, is like
Hmm.
getting to know those guys and having a community and not being, I'm not an ingenue guy. I'm not here trying to sell, I'm not Brad Pitt. I'm selling a
Hmm.
mustache. Is what I'm doing, you know. So to me, it's a way more grounded community. Like the character actor community, I feel like is a very grounded community. We
Right.
understand who we are. Like
I,
we're
I think
mustaches and funny faces. And I just been very. That community has been extremely rewarding to
I,
be
I,
involved with.
I love that, and I'm actually smelling a documentary in there,
Yeah, that'd
which
be great.
I
There's
know
been a
there's some
couple.
similar ones. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, there's one of the best is I can't think of the name right now, but it's about backup singers, right?
Mm.
So again, sort of like you're a support role and whatnot, and I forget what it's called. I think it's called 6 second or 6 feet from fame or something like that.
Yeah. Right. I never saw, but
Phenomenal
you're right.
documentary. Um, and I think there's another one for actors, but I
Yeah, there's something
can't
called like the
remember.
guy from the thing. It's called like the guy from the thing or something
Something
like that.
like that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
And that's just fascinating, right? Because we don't even think about that, but it's sort of like a guest musician, right, or an album that sets the tone for the thing that we like, right?
Right.
And so even if you don't know, like Stephen Bailey, like when you watch, whatever show, um, you definitely set the tone for that, right? And it might be in the subconscious. Hopefully it's not, but hopefully just in the subconscious, and people get that, and you do set the tone for that, right? I mean, you have a lot to do with that entire sensation that people have when they're watching something.
Yeah, I guess in a way, that I feel like the support cast, it really, it fills out the world that you need to have,
Yeah.
and if a good support actor understands or been around enough just to get a feel for it, like there's a whole technique to even, like if you watch Grey's Anatomy, it's a perfect example. Grey's Anatomy this is their whole shtick when it comes to
Hmm.
writing, and they do it very effectively and very wonderfully. Their guest cast, whoever the patient is with the heart issue or whatever it is, will almost always, their story will almost always reflect in the series regular story. Like there'll be a
Mm.
similar kind
Hmm.
of thing. So oftentimes when you're working on Grey's Anatomy or a show like that that uses that device effectively,
Hmm.
you might have a chunk of speech. You see that
Hmm.
script, oh man, I got this chunk of speech. You're going to get halfway through that. You're going to get two lines into that, and they're going to cut to the series regular because what you're saying is actually related to their storyline as well. So their reaction,
Huh.
because the story is about them, is more important than me. And
Right.
once you start to understand that, and you have the freedom of that, and you have
Hmm.
just you can breathe into that and not worry about it. then you get to start to do what you're talking about, where everybody just
Mm-hmm.
kind of comes in and fills in and makes this world, and nobody's trying to hit home runs, and nobody's trying to make big moments, because they're just filling out the world and
Mm-hmm.
understanding their capacity. It's like a
Right.
good studio musician, I imagine. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Definitely.
yeah, yeah.
Definitely. I respect a ton, what you do. I stopped doing any drama stuff, like I said, right about 30 years ago.
You're a wise man.
Well, no, I mean, I miss it. Like I've been talking to friends about staging a Rocky Horror Picture Show, which I think would be a fucking blast, but that's not the sort of thing you do after 30 years of not acting, right? I mean, like, there's a lot going on in that particular, show.
Yeah.
But I think it would be a lot of fun, and I've talked to some Seattle musicians about that as well, where we can do um, a modern version, right, of Rocky Horror, which could be a lot of fun, right? Change the music out a little bit, change the costumes out a little bit, because you think about it, and obviously I don't want to talk about this too much longer, and we are going to wrap this up, but when Tim Curry, in 1972 is Frankenfurter. Um, Transvestite was a dirty fucking word. I'm sorry, it's a dirty word now too, but the concept is not dirty anymore, right?
Hmm.
So just imagine like what you could do with a Rocky Horror set in the modern era, right? I mean, think of the
The
boundaries we could push,
anticipation
right?
got me very excited.
There's a guy on Twitter that did he sent out, I forget the handle, but he did in like 2005 or 6 or whatever, like Twitter just started, and he posted, "I see you shiver with dot dot dot." 7 years later, he posted anticipation.
That's a good joke.
That's dedication, man. I mean, that's complete dedication. And nobody knows who it is. I personally think it was probably Tim Curry. I think he was just like, you know what? He's the perfect troll of himself, even, right? So I think I wouldn't be surprised at all. And
There's a dude I'd like to meet, man. I'd
oh
love to
no
meet Tim Curry.
shit. And he did that like the anticipation part came not too long before his big stroke that he had a few years back, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I still think it's him. Like I think he was just like, "Yep, I'm gonna set up
That'd
his
be
Twitter
pretty funny.
account. I'm just gonna
That'd
do
be
this."
pretty funny, man.
Yeah,
I
he's
hope it's him. Let's just pretend it's him. Let's spread a rumor that it's him and just be done with it. It's him.
well,
We live
in
in a
this
post-information world. We just say it is, and it's true. That's the
that's
way
right,
we live,
that's right,
right?
that's right. It's what do they call it? Alternative facts. Let's just
Alternative facts. We
yeah,
have a lot of alternative Tim Curry facts, okay, and
I
we're
love
gonna
it.
stick by them.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one guy I would love to have on to just talk to, it would be him. Right? Like even in his state right now, where he has a hard time talking, but he's still
Mm-hmm.
one of the most articulate humans I've ever heard. Right?
Yeah,
Um,
right.
so I think that would be phenomenal, phenomenal. Stephen, I'm gonna let you go, man. We've been on a little bit longer than I thought,
That's all right.
and
It was fun,
hope
man. I had a good time.
yeah, I hope the video actually works out. If not, we'll do the audio, whatever. I say
All right,
that
bro.
I totally don't edit anything. Hey, brother, thank you so much. Hey, stay on just for a second after we kill this, and we'll talk just a
Okay.
second, okay? All
Yep.
right, cheers, man. Bye.